Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I'm happy to be here with you today as we're going to be discussing something that's a little bit of a mystery and a little bit confusing. And I'm going to be going into some details that you probably haven't seen. In fact, I'm very sure the overwhelming majority of Americans, not only did they not see this, they won't know how to be able to see this. And it regards the January 6th committee and the hearing that was held today. And we're going to be going over that with you. Some of the testimony from Jim Jordan, from Representative Matt Gaetz, and others. And it doesn't matter whether you think January 6th was a riot or not, whether you believe that this investigation should go forward or not. It's a different question and a different mystery that's going on. And I want to go over that with you. Now, before we get started, I do, of course, want to mention that if this is the first time that you're joining us, we want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. We want you to know that we do long-form political commentary. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream. We go to all the social media that the internet lords will allow to reach out to you, to receive your chats, your tweets, and your phone calls from anywhere in the world. Because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in your right to free speech. Even if your government doesn't agree with that, even if the internet overlords disagree, we believe in your right to speak about the issues that are affecting us all from around the globe. And we hope that every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that you will join us for that live stream and add your voice. We're looking forward to seeing you then. Now, let's go on to the issue at hand for today. The question that's been bugging me. And I've been searching for some information pretty much all day long. And it's actually almost impossible to find. Now, you may have heard about the January 6th committee meeting. And again, this is a committee that was put together by Democrats with the purpose of trying to find out if there was collusion. Basically, it's another collusion hunt. Kind of like the Russia collusion hoax, a proven failure, something that was not true. We've seen four different investigations into that. The conclusion was it never happened. It's not true. Well, we do know January 6th happened. That's no question. And it's a question for some people whether it was a riot or something else. A lot of terms have been used for it, in particular insurrection, which I believe is incorrect. And actually, functionally, by definition, is incorrect. But that being put aside, what's happening today? And I can guarantee you, the overwhelming majority of people in America don't know. You know what the news media is telling you, but you don't know what actually happened. And we're going to show you what we mean. So let me first show you. If you wanted to find out what happened today, you would normally go to the internet, right? Say you were a regular person, you go to the January 6th committee meeting, right? That's what you type into Google. Matter of fact, I'm going to update this while I'm here with you. Just updated it. It's today is October 21st. It's 12:05 a.m. And I wanted to make sure there would be a chance for the news media to be able to put out the information. And what you're going to see is you're going to see information from CBS, CNBC, USA Today, C-SPAN, ABC. What you're seeing on all of these channels, CBS News, YouTube, you're seeing the same coverage. They're all talking about Steve Bannon. They're all talking about the fact that Steve Bannon the committee voted to hold him in contempt, which means it goes in front of the General Congress. It's expected to happen on next Thursday, which would be October 28th. But what you don't see is the meeting itself, the hearing itself. You don't hear and see what was being spoken about. Now, you may say, Mike, well, that's because you're looking at videos. You should go to news. Okay. And if we check out the news, you're going to see CNN, Axios, Vanity Fair, MSNBC, Washington Post. They're all talking about Steve Bannon. They're all talking about the contempt charges. What you're not seeing is the actual meeting itself. Hang on. I know I'm looking at news. What was all? Just check all, just like you would. And if you go to all, you're going to see Steve Bannon and the contempt charges. You're not seeing what actually happened. You're not actually seeing what was being said. The media doesn't want you to hear what was being said, in particular by Representative Jim Jordan, Representative Matt Gaetz, when they were speaking in the hearing as witnesses being questioned by the committee. You're not seeing that. You're not hearing what was said. I know what you're thinking. Well, the best way to do it is go to C-SPAN. And if you go to C-SPAN, they don't have a copy of this. C-SPAN is a nonpartisan, non-major media organization that only presents information that happens in Congress. They don't have the story. You can look for it. It's not there. What you are going to get are stories like this, which is being reported by the left-leaning media. Actually, 10 organizations, left-leaning, 80% involved in the news, none of the right, saying that Representative Jim Jordan tells the House panel he can't recall how many times he spoke with President Donald Trump on January 6th. Well, that's not exactly true. That's not what he said. And I'm going to go into that in a moment. But I want you to understand, this is the only thing you're hearing, is the isolated single quotes that he had. He spoke for over 20 minutes. Matt Gaetz spoke for over 20 minutes. They had full conversations. They were asked multiple questions by multiple members of Congress on several different issues. And this is the only thing that you're being told by the major news media. That, yes, Representative Jim Jordan said he had talked to President Trump at some point in that day, maybe multiple times, and he didn't recall that exactly. He did recall that he had spoken to him after the riots, after members of Congress had been isolated into safe rooms. So that's what you hear. That's the message coming from the left. They're trying to give you a very specific way to think about this story. That they're putting questions in your mind. Why doesn't Representative Jim Jordan remember? Why can't he recall exactly what happened? Well, I can tell you one of the reasons why he can't recall. It's the same reason that Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says she can't remember. I can tell you as someone who's been in the middle of a civil war. Yes, I was in Russia. I was at Moscow as they shut down the city. There was a coup attempt that was going on. I was in Tbilisi, in Georgia, as they started their civil war. And I can tell you, many of those days were not exact. I do not have an exact memory of when I made phone calls, when I tried to reach out to people because the phone lines were cut in Moscow and you couldn't reach international. I spent almost a full day trying to make one international call. Yeah, I remember that. Do I remember how many people I called? No. Do I remember when I called them? Generally. These things happen when you are in an incident, but that's giving an excuse. Jim Jordan can speak for himself. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez can speak for herself, how her story has migrated and changed, and Democrats will denounce you for daring to say, well, your story's changed, you're not being very specific, you've put in a lot of generalities, it doesn't make sense. And if you question that, well, no, then you're evil and you're somehow heartless because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's a woman, she was afraid. Well, that's not how it works. The rules are the rules. If we have a set of rules and you're going to attack people for not being able to remember everything exactly correctly, as you say is okay for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, then it should be okay for everyone. But that's not how the news media works, because they have an agenda. And that's why they're specifically taking just this moment out of over 20 minutes of conversation from Representative Jim Jordan, and they're giving you just a sentence or two. That's it. Just a sentence or two, except it's not. Because if it was, you would be able to go to C-SPAN and you would be able to see this right now. you would be able to put in your Google search and you'd be able to find this video, the full context of their conversation. Except you can see the votes and the reason why they said they want to hold Steve Bannon in contempt, but you can't hear what was actually said. People aren't putting that available to you. Instead, they want to tell you that Jim Jordan was talking to the House committee and they're going to tell you what you should think about what he said, how you should interpret what he said, but they won't actually tell you and give you access to what he said. That's pretty troubling. Even if you go onto YouTube, you will not find the full content unless you look very, very carefully. You see, we were able to find it, but you have to go to a site which is known as cleveland.com, a site that most people won't know and many people might not trust because they don't know what it is. They've never heard it. It's not a major news media. It's based in Ohio. Are you looking for Ohio news? Are you going to listen to news coming out of Ohio about what's happening in Congress? Most people won't. People in Ohio might, but if you happen to be in New York State, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, California, Texas, you're probably not going to be looking for this link. And you have to go through the entire article from cleveland.com to come down to the very bottom. And that's when you'll see, hey, look, they've got a video here. They've got coverage. And I want to show you, this is what you're not being told, in part.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, members of the Rules Committee. Earlier, Representative Cheney said, we can have an investigation or we can let it go uninvestigated. I mean, what a ridiculous statement. The FBI's been investigating this issue for the past, since it happened. Exactly where it's supposed to happen. 600 people have been charged. Investigations are supposed to happen in the executive branch. Congress has an oversight function, but Democrats don't want to do that. They don't want to ask the appropriate questions, like why was the security posture so weak that day? Why wasn't the National Guard here? They don't want to ask those questions. Instead, the actions of the January 6th committee, I believe, are a complete assault on Americans' liberty. There have been 4 batches of subpoenas issued. 4 batches. The one we're talking about today, Mr. Bannon, Mr. Meadows, Mr. Patel, Mr. Scavino. Second one to Mr. Clark, employee at DOJ, former employee at DOJ. The 3rd batch to organizers of some other rally I didn't know about that happened that day. And then there's been subpoenas issued to 11 individuals, 11 American citizens, who asked the government for permission on an application to hold the Trump rally.
Here it comes.
Now think about this. They put their names on an application. The government asked them to do that. They give that application to the government granted it, and now the January 6th committee petitions them to ask them questions about exercising their First Amendment right to assemble.
See, and I wanted you to hear this because you're not getting any of that context. That's nothing like that is being said to you. The Washington Post didn't want you to tell you that Representative Jim Jordan said they're attacking Americans' First Amendment rights. They're questioning people on their First Amendment right to assemble, that they are chilling your rights. And in fact, if we go back, I'll go back in just a second, Mr. Jordan, Representative Jordan goes on to say that they're now using the internet and the internet overlords to find out whether or not you spoke about January 6th and to tell the government about it without notifying you, to include you into this investigation being held by members of Congress without notifying you in violation of the law, which is very interesting. And if you think I'm making that up, if you think that that isn't what was said, I will go back to the video. I want you to see this.
Here's what they ask him about. Subpoena to those individuals, those 11 individuals, includes a demand for agenda and selection of speakers for the rally. They ask them for coordination of the speakers' respective speeches, discussions of content, and they ask them, think about this, communications with or concerning any member of Congress. So, If some of these individuals happen to talk to a member of Congress exercising their First Amendment liberty to petition their government to redress their grievances, wow, the January 6th committee wants to depose them on those kind of things. Some of these individuals are 20-some-year-old staffers. I mean, this is largely a clerical thing when they filled out this application. Setting out chairs, escorting people to their seats, plugging in microphones. No, they're gonna go after them. Even though the investigation the FBI is doing says, find scant evidence of any type of coordination. Here's what it says: violence was not centrally coordinated. This is the Reuters story. Oh, and here's the source. Here's the source on that story. Senior lawmakers have been briefed in detail on the results of the FBI's investigation so far, find them credible. A Democrat congressional source said. So there is an investigation going on where it's supposed to happen in the executive branch. Oh, I forgot. One other thing the January 6th committee's done that I believe is a direct attack on liberty. They've sent letters to the carriers, the tech companies, asking that they, for hundreds and hundreds of Americans, according to news reports, asking that they preserve all communications of that individual for the past 6 months. And they told these companies, oh, by the way, don't let the person we're telling you to preserve information for, don't let them know, like the law requires, don't let them know that we've asked you to do this. And if you feel compelled to follow the law and tell them that this January 6th, that government is asking for this information to be preserved, if you feel compelled to, tell us first.
Okay, so isn't that important? Don't you want to know that information? Now, I want to make it very clear for you. I'm not asking you to agree with Representative Jim Jordan. I'm not asking you to agree with the individuals who rioted on January 6th. I'm not asking you to become a Republican or a conservative or a libertarian. I'm not asking you to make any choices here. I am asking you one very simple question. Why won't the news media let you know this? Why isn't this on C-SPAN? Why won't CNN or CBS or ABC or MSNBC, why won't any of these channels let you hear what I just presented to you thanks to Cleveland.com, the only source that I can find that at? Now, we have over an hour. It's a 2-hour and 32-minute conversation, which deals with a lot of things. Over an hour of dealing with Mr. Steve Bannon, but also listening to Mr. Representative Jim Jordan and Representative Matt Gaetz. Why is the news media denying you this information? Why are they denying you the opportunity to hear what's being said? Do they not want you to ask, is the internet, are the internet overlords giving your private information to members of the government without your permission, without your knowledge, in violation of the law, and not notifying you of that you are being targeted for an investigation that you may not even know about? And literally, this is punishment for people who assembled. Because yes, there were several dozen people, even 100 people, who were rioting, and there were thousands that were not. And as we have heard throughout all of the second half of 2020, you can't judge a event, a rally, a protest by a handful of people that are out burning down buildings. This is what we were told from BLM. This is what we were told about Antifa. We were told we can't judge the George Floyd protests around this nation that did over $1 billion of damage in Minneapolis alone. No, we can't judge the event, the BLM protests, by the fact that they burned down Minneapolis, that there were members of Antifa that killed people in Dallas, in Portland, in Seattle. That's what we were told. So then why are we now seeing that people are being punished because their private information is being handed over by internet companies to the government without notification of that individual? Why are they looking to punish people, to investigate people with the full power of the government just because they may have spoken about January 6th, or they may know someone who went down to D.C. not to go and break into government buildings, but to be part of the protest of questions. And by the way, these were questions at the time and since that most Americans have had and continue to have. If you look at Quinnipiac, they came out with a poll on May 27th. And in that poll, when Americans were asked whether each political party is acting in the best interests of democracy, Americans taking the polls told them 59% of Republicans said no. 49% of Democrats said no, that the political parties are not acting in the best interests of American citizens, which is the obligation of members of Congress. They're there to represent you. Their obligation is to serve you, not their party, not their political platform, not their political preferences. In fact, if we also look at this, we'll see that there was also a poll that came out, a CNN poll, as reported by Forbes. This came out on September 15th. And on September 15th, we see that 31% of Democrats and 76% of Republicans were not confident that American elections reflect the will of the people. The public have an issue. They have a question. There is a lack of credibility going on. Now, again, I'm not telling you about what happened in the 2020 election. You can have your own feelings on that. You can make your own decision about that. And God knows that if I give you my opinion about that, the last time I even spoke about the subject, and I quoted Reuters, and I quoted the Honolulu Times and several other major news media sources, I was struck by YouTube and I was taken off for 7 days. So I can't even tell you what I'm thinking. But again, I'm only going by what's going on in this committee meeting. You can make your own conclusions. But there is a question here about our First Amendment rights. Why is this so hard to find? Why is it so difficult to hear the complete discussion? Why will the major news media not report on the very things you just heard? Because if Mr. Jordan is incorrect, then it should be very easy for the news media. It should be very easy for the Democrats to be able to refute this, to provide evidence and say, no, they aren't asking social media organizations to go out and give private citizens information, their data, their communications, and handing it over to the government without notification of the public in violation of the law. That should be very simple for them to refute, unless they are doing it and they don't want you to know. And that's why they told the internet overlords not to tell you, and that's why the news media doesn't want to report it. That should trouble you. That should be something that's a concern. That is a violation of your First Amendment right. Whether you agree or disagree with January 6th doesn't matter. That's an important issue. That's an important question. And I can tell you that according to the data, there are 31% of Democrats, there are 76% of Republicans that have questions. That's the majority of America. But you know, when I was looking through this, and I'm trying to find out all the information, and I was searching. In fact, I even went, because you may do this yourself. You may say, well, let me go to the January 6th house.gov website. Let me go directly there and see what they have to say about this, because obviously they're going to provide you information. This is the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. This is their website. And you may say to yourself, well, Mike, okay, so all the answers should be here. Sure, let's go to Watch Live. What do they provide to the public? Nothing. They have no information. Okay, maybe it's in the media center. No, they have opening statements from the Rules Committee, but they don't tell you what actually happened in the committee. There is no comment there. How about committee activity? Hearings. This was a hearing. What do they have? No. They have, the last time they actually provided the public any information was July 27th. Well, how about business meetings? Maybe this was considered a business meeting. No. The last time they had anything on that was October 19th. They're not providing it to you. They don't want you to know. And this is a problem. When the government does not want to tell you what is happening, what the government is doing, especially on something that they're telling you is so important, so absolutely vital to democracy, that this has to be investigated. There has to be collusion. There are allegations of the same kind of allegations that we heard about Russia collusion. We have to investigate it. We need not one investigation. We need 4 investigations. We have to spend tens of millions of dollars, even as the FBI does the investigation. And we're doing it again. Same thing with Kavanaugh. Have to do the investigations. We have to investigate the investigation. We have to go and search and look for something that doesn't apparently seem to exist. Now, for Kavanaugh, for Russia collusion, we found nothing. What are we finding here? We already know that the FBI has stated that they're not aware of any connection of a collusion. None. Now, you'll say to me, Mike, well, you didn't go to C-SPAN. What about on their YouTube page? By the way, this is the C-SPAN YouTube page. No information. They don't update it. They don't have anything updating, telling you what was actually said. They have the vote on Steve Bannon. They want you to know about that, but they don't want you to hear what Jim Jordan had to say, the information that I've just shown you. And here's something that's very important, because this is the most important part. Because when you do go and search for anything other than just hearing about Steve Bannon, when you go and say, well, what about the rest of the meeting? What else can you hear? This is the conversation you're going to get. This is from Forbes, one of the few places that I was able to find any other information so that you can see it. And all the links for everything I'm going over will be in the description so that you can see it for yourself in full context and be able to come to your own conclusion. But I want you to hear, this is the most important thing that the committee, the January 6th committee, this is what's the most important thing on their mind.
Mr. Jordan, when you appeared before the Rules Committee earlier this year in January, I asked you to say 5 simple words. The election was not stolen. And you were unwilling to say them then. Can you say those 5 words?
I've never said it was stolen, Mr. Chairman. I'll give you the same answer. Never said it was. I said we should investigate it. I said on January 6th, when the electoral votes were counted, that Joe Biden is president of the United States. And if you got a problem with that, I don't understand it. The real question is, why don't you guys want to investigate what happened?
You said a lot of words just now, but unfortunately, you're still unwilling to say those 5.
So the most important thing, the first thing that they wanted to ask of Representative Jim Jordan, a member of Congress, the most important issue and question that is on the mind of the January 6th committee, that you agree and disagree with 31% of Democrats, you disagree with 76% of Republicans, that you are not in agreement with many of his own constituents. That's the most important question that they have to ask. And this goes on for minutes as they battle back and forth and having a discussion about whether or not Mr. Jordan will say exactly the words that the committee wants to hear. Because we already heard Mr. Jordan state very clearly that the president is Joe Biden. He acknowledged that. He also stated that there should be a count, a audit. But that's perfectly fine. That's his opinion. He can have an opinion. And that's the thing that you should be really noticing about this. This is the thing that's important. This committee is about making people bow down and agree with the very few elite. They want justification. They want credibility. They want acceptance. They want submission. They want you to think the way they think. They want you to say what they say. You don't have to. It's America. You can acknowledge that the president is Joe Biden without saying that you agree with everything that's gone on. To not agree with the electoral process. You can acknowledge two things: that there was a peaceful transfer of power in our nation, as has always occurred 45 times previously, and now the 46th time, and still have questions and have doubts and not like the answer. Matter of fact, if I remember correctly, in 2016, these Democrats were the very same people who told us, what was it Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says? Resist? What was it Nancy Pelosi said? She didn't trust it? That she didn't believe it? That they had questions about this? That they fought against this? And for 5 years in all the news media, we heard them say, well, this is illegitimate. It's a problem. Within an hour of the 2016 election on national news, we heard about the protests as Democrats came out in the tens of thousands protesting, saying this wasn't fair, something was wrong. In 2020, you can't do that. 2016, you could do that. You can't do that in 2020. And the only thing that's different is President Trump, Orange Man Bad, is out, and the old man, the senile man, is in. So why is it so important that Jim Jordan has to say exactly the words that he wants to hear? Why is it so important that the select committee wants to hear specific words? It's not good enough to acknowledge that Joe Biden is in the Oval Office. It's not good enough to say that there was a peaceful transfer of power in our government. No, you have to submit. It's a trick. It's brainwashing, literally, because you're under pressure to say exactly, because it's the way you think. If you say it, then you're thinking it, and therefore that thought is in your mind. They want you to grill into you. You have to say this. You have to say it's legitimate. You have to say that it's credible. You have to. Because when you say it, then it becomes true. At least in a kernel of your mind. It puts doubt in your mind to question them. Matter of fact, it kills the questions you have because you've now given this life, birth in your mind, in your soul. It is a tactic that is used when you see interrogations that are going on, where individuals are forced to say certain very specific terms under extreme pressure, under threat, because it's a way to break a person. And who are they trying to break? Is it the American people? Maybe. That's for you to decide. I can't say, especially not on YouTube. But I think it's very important that that's the most important, because of all the questions they could have possibly asked, they had just the contempt ruling on Steve Bannon. They could have talked about that. That could have been the first thing on their mind. There were other questions they went on to ask. Well, not really. But they could have asked other questions. No, the first and most important question, they didn't ask Representative Jim Jordan, did you speak to President Trump, Orange Man Bad, about trying to commit a riot? Did you? They could have asked that question. You would think that would be the first question on their mind. No, the first question is, will you submit? Now, you may agree with it, you may disagree with it. That's not the thing I'm speaking about. It's that they're saying that's the most important thing and the first thing, and it was also the last thing that was said to Representative Jim Jordan. As you can see in the clip from Forbes, say these words. Say exactly these words. Submit. That is very interesting, and that's very troubling, because that's the information that's coming out to the public. That the whole conversation was submit. That you must submit. And if you don't submit, then you're going to be in trouble. Then you're going to get pressured. Now you're going to have issues. You're going to be investigated because you didn't submit. That's not freedom. That's not choice. That's not free speech. Anyone should be able to have the ability to have any opinion they want. You can acknowledge that Joe Biden's in the Oval Office. That doesn't mean you have to accept how he got there. That's not required. But it is when you have a political party that wants to maintain power. And it's very, very scary. I'll show you another conversation. And this is with Matt Gaetz. And this is Matt Gaetz speaking to Representative Jamie Raskin. And this is the second question that comes from Mr. Raskin to Mr. Gaetz. And I want you to hear that as well.
Here's the question I want to ask you. Let's just start with basics. Do you accept that Joe Biden won the 2020 presidential election?
I accept that Joe Biden is the president.
Do you accept that he won the election by more than 7 million votes and defeated Donald Trump by 306 to 232 in the Electoral College, a margin that Donald Trump called a landslide when he beat Hillary Clinton by the same numbers?
I think that our election was uniquely polluted by these indiscriminate mail-in ballots. I think that this was the first time in America's history where the mailbox beat the ballot
do you think
box.
there's...
Well, I can't play that because YouTube, even though I'm playing something that's on YouTube, and this is coming from members of Congress, I'll get struck on this channel and I will be removed for playing this according to the rules in YouTube and their selective rules on how they enforce this. Yes, it is that crazy. But what did you hear him say? I want you to think about that. Mr. Raskin said he wants him to submit. You must accept this. You must accept it the way I am saying it. It is not enough to say that Joe Biden is in the Oval Office. It's not enough to say that Joe Biden is the president of the United States, that we had a peaceful transfer of power. No, you have to submit. This was the second question that he asked. It was one of the most important things that Representative Raskin could ask at a congressional hearing. Will you submit? You will say these things that I am telling you, and you will accept them as truth. That is what he's saying. That is what that conversation is about. It is about power. It is the same thing that we heard asked of Mr. Jim Jordan. Representative Jim Jordan. It's about power. You will accept that our power is all. That's it. It's about power, submission and power. And this is maybe why it's almost impossible to find the full hearing, to be able to listen to what was actually being said and to hear the full context. And I understand I'm only giving you a small clip. I'm also linking to this so that you can see it. But I'm giving you a reason. I want you to understand this is why you should hear this. Because we're hearing Representative Jim Jordan try and defend our First Amendment rights, which are in peril if he is correct. And again, I'm not going to say he is or he is not. If he is correct in what he has stated and what the January 6th committee is doing, then our First Amendment rights are in jeopardy. Our government is being corrupted before our very eyes. And we're being told it's all for your benefit. The government's here to help you because the government gets everything right. Because Russia collusion was true, right? No. Took us $30 million in 4 investigations and we found out, no, it's not real. It isn't true. Rachel Maddow was wrong for 3 years in a row. The major news media was wrong. They lied to you for 3 years in a row, and they didn't apologize. And now we have members of Congress saying, you must submit. You must accept our power. Why? That's not required of American citizens. American citizens can assemble. And if some American citizens violate that, they should be punished to the fullest extent of the law. Absolutely. I've said that about BLM riots. I've said that about Antifa. And I will say that about Republicans and conservatives as well. If you have violated the law, if you have introduced violence into a protest, it's no longer a protest, and those individuals need to be held accountable. I would like to see that for the BLM, where in New York State alone, over 3,500 individuals were just released. They were arrested. They violated the law. They introduced violence into protests in New York State, whether that was in New York City, in Brooklyn, or, or in Rochester, New York, and everywhere else. Those individuals got arrested and then they were released and the charges were dropped. We're not seeing that in January 6th. Something's wrong. Laws are being arbitrarily followed. This is important for America. And it may be important for reasons you may not realize at this moment. You may be absolutely happy that Joe Biden is in the Oval Office right now. That's your opinion. You can have it. Great. You may have voted for Joe Biden because you believed he was going to do better than Donald Trump. Perhaps you think of Donald Trump as Orange Man bad. That's your opinion. You have that right to do so, to have those thoughts. I do not require you to have different thoughts. But I do ask you, and I ask you, to think about the consequences of what you have heard today. Put all of your political preferences aside and think about what you just heard today, that you're not able to find easily, that has been hidden from you from the major news media, that they are not reporting on. The questions that Mr. Jordan has raised about this, about the direct demand for submission, that is the primary thought and the primary goal of the members of the committee. Is that what America is supposed to be about? Is that what we're truly investigating? Whether people will submit to the will of a small group of elites in our government? And if that is what we are seeing, and I believe it is, and if that is what their purpose is, and I believe it is that really America? Have we fallen that far? Maybe that's why China is threatening to take over Taiwan. I don't know. And you may disagree. You may say, Michael, you're out of context with this. You didn't play enough of the clip. You didn't search hard enough. You didn't give the major news media enough time. Even though they've already reported on this story, even though they already have clips out already, even though they've got the full video of the entire event, which is why they have their clips out. Oh, no, you just haven't done enough. Maybe that's what you think. And that's okay. I want to hear your comments. I'd like to see what you have to say about this. But I found it troubling. I found it troubling that this information is so difficult to find for the average American citizen, and so little is being discussed about it. You don't have to agree with me, but you should ask the questions, because we do. And we hope that if you have found this to be interesting, informative, and useful, that hopefully the links will be of use to you, then please consider subscribing, giving us a like and a share. We look forward to it. And most of all, we do hope that you will join us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we do our live stream, where we speak to you from around the world to hear your voice in tweets, in chats, in phone calls, to tell us what you think about what's happening. And until that time, I want to thank you, and I wish you the best.